PowerPoints this time is not going to have the videos. I'm going to show some videos today that are really good videos in my opinion, and ones that I actually send out to clients as well. So just to kind of talk about this again is, we're still working on, hold on, sorry, I'm trying to get my PowerPoint back up. Here we go. All right. So we're still working here in the asanas this time, right? But we'll still be focusing a little bit on the breathing as well. And then here we're going to be moving the body. So we're really going to be focusing on the physical body of the sheath. But again, we'll be getting a little bit into the breath as well. I left this one up here because whenever we're talking about doing breath work, or whenever we're talking about doing these asanas, one thing to kind of keep in mind is whenever they talk about tightening the chest or poking the chest out, or tighten the abdomen or poking the abdomen out, also think of that in the flows of this energy as well. I mean, that's the way that it is kind of thought of in the yogic philosophy. So kind of starting to change some of that mindset of whenever, you might hear somebody say to broaden the shoulders and stick out the chest, that we're really talking about, this prana and implementing this type of energy while also balancing the chakras, right? If you have a hard time opening up your chest, then that's also part of what we're talking about whenever we get into it. All right, so now talking a little bit, so we're going to get into Ashtanga Yoga. So for those folks who are not familiar, Ashtanga Yoga it has a set foundation of how it does every single class. It is almost the same class every single time. I mean, teachers mix it up some, but it is typically the same routine over and over. In Ashtanga Yoga, instead of putting the mats out in front of you when you're kind of in front of the teacher, all the mats face one another in a linear path all the way down. So it's a different style, I guess you can say, than probably a lot of yoga studios and places that you kind of see yoga. But I'm also showing Ashtanga Yoga because this is one of the paths of yoga that we'll end up studying later, but also we'll see that I use videos from other lineages, I guess you can say, or those other paths that also is the same thing as we do here, right? There's so much overlap between all of those, which is kind of why we didn't start there, right? Because I feel like those are going to be more personal journeys of what you all kind of study on your own. But starting out is a sun salutation. So with the sun salutation, that is typically, the first thing that people do whenever they come to their mat most of the time. And I would say in most places that most lineages and different styles typically have a sun salutation kind of mixed into the sequence some way, somehow. So to kind of look at this one, right, we start in mountain pose, then we lift our arms up overhead, we fold forward all the way down, we come halfway up, and then we get into kind of this push-up pose. Then we go into an upward dog, then downward dog, then back into the forward fold and back up. So it's just kind of, if you could almost equate this to anything, this is like doing your jumping jacks before you get started, right? So this would almost be your yoga jumping jacks before you kind of get started. Yeah, go ahead, Blanca.
So is this each of those poses, is it just like one sun salutation, or is it the whole series? I guess what I'm trying to figure it out is when we are writing our homework, it says to include a sun salutation. Are we just doing one pose, or do we need to do a series of poses to be considered a sun salutation?
You would have to do the entire thing, but for your homework, you can just say sun salutation A or sun salutation B. They just have different variations to them. I don't think we come over B today. Yeah, so you could easily just say sun salutation A, and then you would be talking about this entire sequence. Yeah. Okay. But this is kind of, I don't want to say it's a fast sequence, but you're probably taking 2 to 3 breaths between these, kind of very slow, gentle motion. Again, just getting those muscles warmed up. But yeah,
Mm-hmm.
that's whenever you're saying it, you can just say sun salutation A or sun salutation B. You wouldn't have to
Okay.
spell out each one of those. Yeah. Good
Okay.
question.
Thank you.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you for that clarification. All right. So this is pretty standard. I would say anybody who's kind of gone to a yoga studio has probably been through a sun salutation, whether you've known it or not, right? Whether they just kind of did it and didn't even tell you, they just kind of flowed right through the sun salutation. But I do have a video on this, but don't worry, we won't practice this, so you can just watch the video. This one and one that will break out too.
Hi all, I'm Tess. This is The Right Way with Well and Good. So today I'll show you the right way to do a sun salutation. And in Vinyasa Yoga, which is a lot of what we practice today, you'll start with a sun salutation, or Surya Namaskar in Sanskrit if you've heard a teacher say that. Just means sun salutation, and really all you're doing is warming up your body, 1 breath per movement, preparing your body, your muscles, your joints for the rest of your sequence. But before we get into that, I see a lot of people doing it incorrectly or not the safest way. So this is the wrong way to do a sun sal. Super exaggerated. Breathe in, arms overhead, a lot of throwing your back out, sticking hips out, and then just a lazy fold forward as you exhale. Breathe in, keeping your rounding in your back, and then hopping back to a plank pose, which kills me, is so bad on your back. And then a lot of, and then pressing into a down dog. And a lot of down dog is like this, and then hopping to your feet, super heavy, looking forward, coming all the way up, and then back down. Super exaggerated, but I see it a lot. So no matter where you are in your practice, it's super easy to make these mistakes. Sun sal is really hard. You're warming up your body. So wherever you are in your practice, here's some cues I give a lot that help all levels. Feet come together. Breathe in, Urdhva Hastasana, hands touch overhead. Really lift your ribs off of your waist. And as you exhale, keep that length as you fold forward. You really want fingers in line with your toes. If that's really hard for you to do, just bring your hands to your shins. And as you inhale, half lift, you're looking forward, squeezing your shoulder blades, really pressing hands into shins to send that sternum forward. If you're super flexible, fingers can stay on the ground. Step back to plank pose. And this is where I see a lot of this, a lot of that. I don't even know if I can do it. A lot of shoulders like over your wrists. You really want to press the ground away with your palms so your chest is reaching away from that mat. My heels are pressing into the wall behind me. And then as I exhale, it's super easy to put weight in your hips and lower down. But if that's where you are, that's okay. Try this variation. Knees down, intentionally arch your back, lower your chest and chin between thumbs, and inhale, slide forward to cobra. So here my hands are on either side of my lower ribs. I'm squeezing my elbows behind me and lifting my chest. If you'd like to, you can press up to upward facing dog, which is this full expression of sun salutation. So my legs are super strong, lifted from the mat, spreading through collarbones. And then I just press into palms, send my hands back to downward facing dog. 5 breaths here. If you're going to hop to your hands, you lift your heels, bend your knees, look at where you're going, and then you hop. You can also walk your feet to your hands, inhale to your half lift, hands to shins or fingertips in line with toes. Exhale, fold, tuck your chin, press into feet, come all the way up, hands together, Tadasana, arms by your side. So that's the right way to do a sun salutation A. If you'd like more right ways.
All right. Does anybody have any questions about that? Too easy? We're going to break down each pose. So whenever we are in Tadasana, so we're going to have, let's talk a little bit about the anatomy of these slides too, whenever you all are reviewing them. So whenever we look here, I'll have the name of the pose. We'll have the Sanskrit version of that. One way or the other, you'll have the anatomy of the Sanskrit, whether it's how to say it, ta, das, ana, right? And then we'll talk about the breakdown of that. Underneath here in the future, you'll see the counter poses and the contraindication to these poses. And then over here, this is how to walk somebody through the pose right here. And then these are just variations of it with extra things to kind of look out for as you kind of look at this. Um, does anybody have any questions of these as y'all kind of do this? Because y'all will break out and be teaching each other some moves in our poses here in the future. Okay. We'll walk through because really I have a few that we'll walk through. We won't break out and do any that really has or requires you to be on the ground. And whenever we do break out, really focus on being able to just kind of walk somebody through it and kind of think of the language that you want to do. Okay, so breaking this down. So first we'll start in mountain pose, just like you kind of would in sun salutation. And whenever we look at mountain pose, you know, the big thing here is a lot of times people think this is just standing, right? But it is not, right? It's active. You're rolling your shoulders back. You're squeezing them together. You're also engaging the core. And also your arms are kind of out to the side. And then the variation is to lift your hands up overhead. Which here I kind of added this over here and I put a contraindication so you can kind of see the anatomy of the slide coming out is, you know, don't have people lift their hands over their shoulders if they have any shoulder injuries. Sometimes with the rotator cuff, to do this right here, if you had a torn or even semi-torn rotator cuff, could cause even a little bit more damage. So you know, give people warnings if they have anything wrong with their shoulders or shoulder pain, not to lift their shoulders or hands above their shoulders. Does anybody have any questions about these two poses? So really you would start with your feet parallel, right? Draw an imaginary line from the center of your ankles through the second toe of each foot and make these lines parallel to each other. So for the most part, you have everything you need to walk somebody through and get somebody to these poses. Standing forward bend, Uttanasana. So whenever we look here, you know, the main things that we're looking for whenever we break this pose down is really you want your back to be straight until you get to this point, right? And then you'll have a curved back. But you're also going to be feeling this in the hamstrings. Now, whenever they get their feet or their hands to this place, there's several different variations, not in a sun salutation, but the pose in general. If you're putting this into your sequence, a lot of people will have them grab their toes. Sometimes they'll wrap their hands all the way around. And then, of course, you have the variation here for people whose hamstrings may not be as flexible. So really also start to think about different variations. Also, another variation that is perfectly okay here is the blankets that you all should have. You can have them place that underneath the heels here. Just kind of helps a little bit ease the tension on the back of the hamstrings. Any questions about this? I don't think I'm looking at the chat either. So let me look at the chat and that might help.
I have a small question about the poses on this.
Yeah, go ahead.
If we have students with hearing impairments and they get vertigo really easy, is it better to stay away from bends in general?
You know, that's a very good question. And I would say yes. I would probably stay away from maybe not bends, but definitely inversions for sure. Which we'll talk, well, I think we show a few inversions here, but this is almost getting into an inversion, right? So if you had someone like that, I would almost stop them here and give them blocks for that. Because I think this would be potentially okay. But I do think once you start getting into these types of, you know, that I think that would create some dizziness for him for sure. So yeah, that's a good call. And I don't even think vertigo is listed up here. Vertigo is listed on some of these for contraindications, But I think, that's another good case scenario of even a special population sometimes may cause another contraindication to be listed up here as well. And I think that would probably be one.
Could one of them be a shunt? I have a kiddo in my classroom who has a shunt in her head.
Yeah, that would definitely be a contraindication for sure. I would almost say any type of head injury, you would probably almost, I guess that's not really technically a head injury, but definitely something that you want to be on the lookout for. I would say I would keep them almost in the chair at all times too, which all of these variations can even be in the chair. Because if you could also think of this person just sitting in a chair right now, they would just fold forward and, you could either have their elbows on their knees or kind of their arms draped over their knees, leaning forward. But still, I would say with the shunt, I would probably stay away from any type of inversion or even leaning forward like that for sure. And cautious with the vertigo and the dizziness for some of those folks with inner ear problems too and other issues. So good call on those. But here it says a back injury, but I would also say a head injury or anything wrong with their head. Low blood pressure, I don't know if we would know that, and hopefully, well, I guess there would be potential for pregnancy. So I would definitely say with being pregnant too, I wouldn't shy away from this because sometimes this can feel really good. I think I talk a little bit later on about using props for pregnancy. And really for pregnancy, you can almost have them on all fours and then have their bellies kind of in between a bunch of blankets there, and propped kind of all around. I would almost have them leaning forward in that way instead. But that's a preference, not necessarily a necessity, I guess, from the book standards. But I would just take more caution with that. Here I just kind of show this just to kind of show it, right? Folding forward and the variation, pretty much the same as the other one that we were just talking about. But still, you can kind of see the difference here, right? The further you kind of have this L shape type, right, is going to be a way, harder on the hamstrings. You can also have people bend their knees slightly and still have the props here as well. So this one's easy. I would say the same contraindications, even though they didn't have any listed in the book. I would still say everything that we just listed over there, I would translate to here as well. Any questions about those two? Those are great questions as well. But I think we can also see how the populations that we serve or maybe know can already create those extra contraindications, right? I think you're already kind of thinking like, oh, wait, maybe we should not do these types of poses. So now with this one, I think she showed a good demonstration of really getting into chaturanga and kind of getting on down to the ground is really an active process. So really you're kind of active through this entire process. But this is, next slide will be the upward facing dog, right? Is here you kind of see his toes are engaged, feet are kind of straight and parallel or perpendicular to the ground, right? And then the body's kind of parallel to the ground. Elbows are kind of parallel to the ground. And this is really a very active pose throughout the entire body because you're kind of feeling it through the legs, you're engaging your core, and you most certainly kind of feel it through your shoulder areas and arms. So pretty active. Carpal tunnel, right? That's something that I don't think we've talked at all about for contraindications. I don't know if we would see anybody in the younger population, but I'm sure there probably are. But definitely if we're teaching teachers or staff at the schools, or if you're out in the communities, carpal tunnel, anytime you see kind of this bend in the joints, like here, especially in the wrist. We'll talk a little bit about it in other poses with the ankles. That tension, you always have risk for more pain and discomfort. So kind of areas to look out for. Counter poses is downward facing dog, right? Just because you're active here and then you're going to be active in a different way with downward facing dog. Any questions about this one? We're kind of going through these fast before we break out because the other video, the sun salutation A video, kind of explained all these. So that's the reason why I'm not showing more videos of these on top of it. So just kind of giving you that explanation. Does somebody have a question? Sorry. I don't think you're talking to me. There you go. Okay, so four limb staff pose. This is really just kind of that almost halfway push-up pose, if you could call it, or equate it to something in modern time right now, right? Is that halfway push-up pose. So getting into upward facing dog, right? So now we're kind of looking at a pinch in the spine back here, right? So once you kind of get in here, this is something with people who have low back pain or thoracic back pain. Up in the shoulders is good because you can kind of see the shoulders typically stay straight besides maybe right here. So, it's really just these areas in the spine right through there that cause problems. And I would say people with any issues down here. Sometimes you'll see them with these quad injuries and things like that, or maybe even a hip flexor, areas like that. You'll see that this can cause discomfort there as well. But those are the areas to kind of look out for here. We have kind of the counter pose as downward facing dog. Kind of makes sense, right? Upward and downward. And then also child's pose. I don't have child's pose on one that we'll talk about today, but it is a very active pose. And if you're not familiar with it, it's a pretty foundational pose, and it's very, very engaging as well. Our contraindications is back or neck injury. I would say I usually never have people look up, even whenever I do it now, just because I'm more sensitive to people's necks. And I may have talked about this a little bit in here, or people have heard me talk about it, is one of the most common occurrences for headaches that are not like migraines and things like that, is these occipital nerves that run through the back of your head, and to be able to stretch those out and do things. But whenever you get in this area, you're almost pinching that, which could cause tension in your occipital nerves, which could cause eye pain and full-on head pain. So that's the reason why whenever you kind of see this in poses, I typically never do it. But that's just, again, more my probably bias. I know a lot of people do it and they never get pain, but I typically stop people here, right, to look straight ahead to where you're not really kind of causing that, pinch of a nerve or muscles, or kind of that tension there. So, but carpal tunnel here too, right, because the wrists are in this as well, and you're putting a lot of body weight here. If you kind of take that extra little step, you're putting even more weight at a different angle. So something to think about there as well. And then pregnancy, right? You don't want anybody, I would say anytime any pose requires anybody to lay on their belly, for anybody pregnant, that would be a contraindication. But even here, I don't know if any of this would be good for being pregnant either, of kind of stretching that belly out that way. So a couple of counter indications, but very easy, right? You kind of lay down on the floor, you pull your hands up to almost shoulder length or a 90-degree angle, and then you push up, elevating your spine or your skull all the way up to the ceiling. And then you may feel your hips come off of the ground, and then you may feel the stretch back here through your quads, might feel some tension in your lower back, things like that. So that's kind of how you would walk somebody through this one. But can very much be in a normal sequence, and doesn't, all these poses, and the reason why I'm showing them this way, even though we showed it on the video, is these poses can be in any sequence. It doesn't have to be in a sun salutation. So you can teach these anytime. And then here's downward facing dog. And this one is whenever we think about this one here, I'm going to show a video from the same group of people, that here, whenever you see downward facing dog, right, your shoulders are actually engaged and squared with the ground. So you're pushing up through here. So your spine is straight and elongated, right? So this is straight, and then this is straight. So this is actually active and engaged through this process, right, of being flat here. So you'll feel it back through here through your hamstrings. You may feel it in your knees with some discomfort there, but also you'll feel it in your calves. Now, of course, if you have ankle problems, you do not want to do this way. I would say even with some ankle problems, you might have issues here, but you can kind of tell them to maybe stop at this point if they do, but if that's discomfort, to continue, because again, looking at the pinch of that, right, is that could cause discomfort at the front of those ankles. But also to kind of think of this too, is it's almost like you're pushing that way towards the sky while simultaneously pushing that way towards the sky as well. So it's very active and engaged that way. They have carpal tunnel on here, high blood pressure, and the reason why is this is an inversion as well. So some of those things we were talking about with those issues, we would not want them to definitely be in this angle as well, because you also have to, I would say if you're not used to this, you're going to be thinking a lot about where your arm placements are. Is your shoulder square? Do you feel a hinge? Are you know like a hinge here? Is it stretched and active here, right? There's a lot of moving, or a lot of parts that are into a downward facing dog. But the counter pose is child's pose, which is another, again, active pose as well. Any questions on this one? Oh, now see. I thought I sent the PowerPoints, but maybe I did not. I thought I added it to the invite, but maybe I didn't actually get to it. Let me hold on 1 second and I'll see if I can real quick. All right, so it should be incoming. So I apologize. I thought I actually added that to that. So, all right, but you'll have it here in a second. I'll say that does not have the videos that we're watching on it. So as you kind of look at that, that's the only missing piece compared to what we're looking at now. All right. So with downward facing dog, again, like I said, you know, it's really active, right? You're almost pulling that way, hinging, but let's watch a video. So these videos that we're watching, I do literally prescribe, I guess you can say, or this is the homework that I would send people in therapy, or, you know, kind of in a private practice. Or I do in my private practice now. So watch these videos. I like how these videos are. You kind of seen in the first one, she kind of tells you what you should not be doing and then walks you through how you should do it. And it's a good way to kind of, if you are thinking, man, am I doing this right or am I doing this wrong? I think these are great videos. The only thing is they don't do very complex ones because they focus mainly on restorative style yoga. So you won't be able to go on there and find a headstand or, you know, something like that. It's mainly going to be very easy poses, but I think it's very good to be able to implement, in my opinion, extremely easy. Or to show people extremely, or how to use this easy, or do the pose. Man, I can't talk. Anyway, here we go.
Hello, my name is Alicia Ferguson.
And I'm Paris Alexandra.
And we are BK Yoga Club. Today we're hanging out with Well and Good's The Right Way, and we're gonna show you 3 most common mistakes that people do when they come into their downward dog. So let's get into it. Paris is gonna be our lovely model today, showing us all the wrong ways that downward dog can come about. So firstly, you notice that Paris's elbows are bent out to the sides, and she's sending a lot of weight to the edges of her pinkies, not really grounding down here. We notice that the head is kind of lifted a little bit, and there's a slight puff in her upper back, right? So it's not quite in the direction that we'd like it. She's, oh wow, she's really bending in her knees here, and the heels are highly lifted off of the earth. So I'm sure this is painful. Let's help Paris out and straighten her all out, guys. Beautiful. So now let's correct these things. I love how you've done this on your own, Paris. This is beautiful. So now you notice that her hands are pressing to the thumb and the index finger. So she shifted her weight from the outside of the hand to the inside, which helps her biceps roll in. Her elbows are nice and long, strong through the arms here. This looks beautiful. Crown of the head is reaching and sending energy down to the earth. It's not strained in the neck, which kind of hurts. And notice when she did that, her whole spine became elongated. So we're not no longer puffing up through this upper back, right? Beautiful. Whoa, I want to say the biggest change is these legs here. So she found some length in her hamstrings, knees are no longer bent, and the heels are sending energy and pressing towards the earth. Great job, Paris. Let's get you out of this. So if you loved what you saw today and you would love to see more of the right way to do some of these postures, please make sure you subscribe to Well and Good. And you can follow us at BK Yoga Club. We'll see you next time on the mat. Bye.
All right, any questions about downward dog? This is probably a more popular pose that almost every sequence almost integrates because it's one of the easiest ways to go from being on the mats, doing ground poses, moving to standing poses, or vice versa, moving from standing poses to the ground. I would say this is one of the few poses that it makes that very easy to be able to make that transition. So you'll see it probably in every single one, but now you'll probably hopefully notice whenever people are doing it wrong, right? If you feel that the pressure is on the pinkies, or if you walk by, right, you can usually tell whenever somebody has that pressure more on that side, that you'll be able to kind of notice that and correct it, or maybe even correct it before it happens. But those are just some of the things that over time will come hopefully natural, and you'll pick up more habits of kind of noticing those key things of whenever you're doing those poses. But any questions at all about that? All right. So now we're coming up to probably the first one that we will do our breakout. So remember, whenever we go over this pose, y'all are going to break out. And the reason why I'm only doing standing ones is it doesn't matter whether you have a mat there or not. You can kind of walk through what and how to do these poses, just so you can kind of start getting comfortable with understanding that and kind of just getting comfortable with the process of walking through this. So we'll break out for about 10 minutes for each one of these whenever we do break out. But the goal is for 5 minutes of you kind of walking somebody through it, getting your language right, and then vice versa, switching over. But it's okay if y'all just sit there and kind of walk through the pose together, kind of talking about some of the language as well, whatever's kind of calling for that group. But yeah, so we'll do that after this one. Does anybody have any questions about the breakouts before we kind of move ahead, because we'll kind of be doing a lot of them? Okay. All right. So here we have Warrior One. This is probably, you'll see warrior poses probably pretty common in sequences as well. So I'll say now we're moving away from just being sequences with inside of a sun salutation and moving more into ones that you'll see in like Ashtanga yoga or other types of sequences as well. Okay. And then whenever we look at, the Sanskrit versions of this, right, is warrior and then pose. But really, whenever we look at the counter poses, whenever we start to talk about that, would be downward facing dog, because now you can kind of see we're stretching out the back in a different way. We're kind of putting an arc to it instead of elongating the spine. But that would be, a counter pose. But as you look and think of counter poses, that's kind of the thing to be thinking about, right? As you kind of see this almost C type shape right here, would be a counter pose, would be anything that kind of elongates these types of spaces. And even though it doesn't do it one full swoop in downward dog, if you remember, this was elongated in downward dog. It was just going that way. And the same thing with whenever their hands were, you were elongated that way or towards the ground, whichever way you want to say it. And of course, contraindications, high blood pressure. We'll probably just see that a lot again. Most of the time we won't know if people have high blood pressure, but also a neck injury. And the reason why is we're kind of back here in this space. I would say, again, I would never have anybody look up in this pose either. I would have them look straight instead, because I don't want to cause that tension in the back of their head. But again, that's my preference. So you all can kind of come up with how you all teach it. That's kind of part of this. But as we do this, right, we are at a 90-degree angle here. Whenever we are with this knee, it is very critical that this knee is not over and in front of the ankle. So you want this to be right here and in line with the ankle. You want a full 90-degree angle. But also, if you see that this knee is cattywampus, so if you're in front of the class and the knee is more off to the side like this, then you want to correct that, right? It needs to be straight and parallel with the body. So you don't want that knee going off to the side. You want it to be straight ahead, and you want it to be over the ankle. So that would be definitely something to walk through and kind of make sure that people have in your classes. Back through here, I think this is pretty self-explanatory back here. Nothing unusual. But again, if people have ankle injuries, this is an area, because this ankle back here, or this foot, is going to be kind of at a 90-degree angle back here too. So it's going to be kind of, a little bit tweaked, I guess you can say. So if they do have ankle things, this may be a barrier. And I would just tell them to do warrior, but then do it with your foot or your feet closer together if they do have ankle injuries. It doesn't necessarily mean they have to stop, because they could be comfortable here. But any questions about Warrior 1? We do have a video, though, so good.
What's something you could do for an accommodation for like knee replacements and things of that nature?
Yeah, that's a good call, too. I would say for a knee replacement, they should still be able to kind of do this move. It is kind of tricky. It really depends on the knee replacement and their recovery and those types of areas. But I would almost say that they would not need to be, they would almost be standing up. So you would definitely have their feet way closer together. You could also do this sitting down. So whenever you're sitting down, your knee would just be off to the side, and then that way they can play with it without putting too much tension on it. So then I would almost sit somebody down and walk them through that to kind of see like that, okay, there's that tension. You sit on the edge of the chair instead, and you just kind of, you can hold on to the edges of the chair, and they can play with it. And then I would have them stand up for sure, because they may not even know their balance issues. And it just depends on how close. But, if they're 2 years after, I would say, they know their body well enough to where they might be able to know where they go. And then I would definitely make sure that if they are doing this, if a 90 degrees isn't really something that they can do for their body, the biggest thing for them would be to make sure that knee is not cattywampus. Because really what you're doing is almost creating a bend, an unnatural bend. Like if your knee is supposed to be facing straight up and down like this, and then you're creating that unnatural bend whenever it goes out that way. So for somebody with a knee replacement, that could cause a lot of discomfort. I don't know if it would cause anything bad for it, but it could cause a lot of discomfort. Knee replacements are tricky, and it's almost like 50% of people have a good experience, and then 50% of people have a bad experience and has a whole lot more tension in their joints and different things. A lot of pain goes away still, but still kind of that stiffness and things, and can't really move a lot of times. So,
can I ask a follow-up question?
Yeah.
So if they've tried the pose and they're uncomfortable, is it saying when you're uncomfortable, go ahead and do that forward fold and just continue that till we go to the next move?
Yep, absolutely. I usually tell people when in doubt, come back either into mountain pose. If we're in stand like this, would probably be a mountain pose. And if they want to, they could play around with like tree pose. Maybe not if they're having knee pain. They might not want to do balance, but they could do something like that. If we're on the mat, I tell people to always, when in doubt, go into child's pose because it's still an active pose and things like that. Same thing with Tanasana, still an active pose. And if you do tree pose, it's even more of an active pose. I will say a lot of people tell people when in doubt, go into downward facing dog. I just don't like that just because, inversions and other things. I'm not, I guess I wouldn't like somebody to sit in an inversion like that for too long if we're doing other poses. And then if we went into another inversion after that, I just think it could cause tricky things. So that's the reason why I say child's pose or Tadasana. But I do see people say that because it is a popular pose and it's easy for transitions. So I would say if you're doing it with kids, maybe not the ones with knee replacements, right, and all that other stuff. I would say with kids, they could easily sit there in downward facing dog for, however long you need to. But, I would definitely be cautious on, special populations and things like that. So great question. Definitely, again, another way and practical application of, knee replacements, shoulder replacements, right? Those are typically the two most common replacements, and they're not very uncommon in today's world at all. They're so fast now that they are actually outpatient procedures most of the time, which is wild to think about. So, I think this is a great way to kind of think about it too. Is shoulder replacements and that. And whenever you think about anything being replaced, anytime you have something replaced, you have screws, you have something implemented into your body, you're going to have an area of tension in your body in those areas, right? Like no matter what, it's going to cause it. If you had a knee replacement, even if it's been 10 years later, you're still going to have some type of tension in your body. And again, I know, I think it was Blanca who was reading the Body Keeps the Score, right? Books like that really lay that out, right? It's the body keeps the score. If you have a major surgery, you're going to have issues and tension, and I shouldn't say issues, but you're going to have tension and you're going to have some areas that you got to kind of work through sometimes in those areas, more so than others. All right, so we'll watch a video and then we'll answer any questions and do a quick breakout.
So we're going to start with Virabhadrasana 1, Warrior 1. Note that in order to come to this pose, it takes some hip opening. So before you come into the pose, taking yourself through like...
Oh, my bad. I can't create the breakouts while the video's playing. Never mind. Now I broke it. Doing this. Sorry about that.
So we're going to start with Virabhadrasana 1, Warrior 1. Note that in order to come to this pose, it takes some hip opening. So before you come into the pose, taking yourself through like the sequence of a forward fold.
Let me pull it up in YouTube real quick. You know what? Never mind. Do we really need to see the video? Let's see. Right now, this whole thing is just being a butt.
So we're gonna start with Virabhadrasana 1, Warrior 1. Note that in order to come to this pose, it takes some hip opening. So before you come into the pose, taking yourself through like the sequence of a forward fold, halfway lift, lunging out, being here in the lunge, and then finding your downward facing dog. Another fun one to do is lift your right leg, bend your knees, take your right foot into a figure 4 and sit back, opening up through the buttocks and the sides of the hip and the sides of the groin. And then as you step the right foot forward and put the back heel down onto the floor, you want heel to heel or roughly right lane and left lane. So if you drew a line right down the center of your mat, you want to make sure that your right foot's on the right side, left foot's on the left side, and you're not on a tightrope, because that's going to be really hard to get the hips open once you come up. So make sure you have a right side and a left side, back toes 45 degrees. As you come up, try not to come up from the back body. Instead, think of looking in at your own navel, curling your tailbone underneath, and rolling up through the back body. Reach your fingertips up and overhead. An adjustment that I really like to give myself in this pose is the same arm that the leg is forward, you reach it behind you, grab for your top inner thigh and spin it up towards the sky. That's going to allow this left hip to swing forward, and then you can reach the fingertips and re-bend the front knee. Think less about knee and more about shin pulling forward. So less about bending that knee and reaching the shin forward. Reach the fingertips up high. And this is your Virabhadrasana 1. Pinkies spin in, heart lifts, belly in.
So does anybody have any questions about this one? You do not have to do the little advanced, knee thing, or, the figure 4. But it is good to see variations like that sometimes.
I feel that I've been doing yoga the wrong way all these years, but I'm
What do
sure
you
I
mean? What do you mean? Oh no.
No, I'm sure. I mean, at least where I go, I always open to help me with, alignment. But just seeing the videos is like, I'm sure I don't look like that.
Well, I think the thing is we also need to remember, um, uh, not everybody does yoga. Whenever we look at this guy, like he has like the perfect triangle pose. I know we're not there yet, right? But it's like triangle, triangle, and then triangle, right? That's why they call it triangle pose. If you were to look at me do triangle pose, right, it would be like Doritos instead of triangles, right? It would be it would not be that. So I think we also need to think like there's educational purposes for showing these poses, and then the realistic thing that we're all going to be, building into those poses. Everybody in yoga, contrary to what people think, is not all. I'm not flexible at all. So I think it's also kind of coming over some of those stereotypes too. But I do think, to your point, hopefully y'all can now see in yoga classes maybe the things that you're liking, maybe the things that you're not liking, and how you can relate those things even now to a different potential purpose, or however you want to say it. All right, hold on one second. I'm gonna go ahead and break everybody out. And if you have any questions, just call me in. All right. But again, here we're just going to be walking through, not triangle pose. I know that's up on the screen, but Warrior 1, and just kind of, again, however you want to do it, but just really learn the pose, be thinking about the pose, how you're going to be saying the language, and then also potentially start to think about, whenever she even said in her video that you really feel it open up through the chest, right? Well, that's trying to balance that heart chakra. That's also that pranayama, right? You're opening it up, which means you're opening it up for energy to come in. So kind of think of it also that way. And then we'll start the breakouts. Hey, Linda. They're in breakouts. I would send you to one, but I think that we're about to bring him back in like a minute anyway. So
Okay, that's okay. Sorry I'm late. I just got home.
no big deal. No big deal. How's everything
Are you going to
going?
be? Oh, really well. Are you going to be at the Rise um, conference on Thursday?
Yeah, I'll be there. How about you?
Oh, yeah, I get to see you in person.
Yeah.
I'll
Um,
be there too.
we I seen that the BIST training was coming out, and then I seen that Fred responded and said that that's going to be next year. So that could come out of next year's budget, but you all would still have, that 5,000 or so dollars towards spending on, something else. So whatever that is for this year. I don't know if y'all had more BIST training coming up or
Mm.
that y'all wanted to do. I don't know.
We just did it internally on that professional development day. I thought we were talking about Heart Map
Heart
too.
math.
Oh,
Yeah,
math.
yeah. Well, I was kind of being the roadblock, so then I sent it out, and I don't think he ever got back to us or to you all to try to set up a meeting, because then I was kind of like, oh, let me just pass that off since I keep being the barrier. And I figured he would follow up since he's the one who owns the curriculum. I just figured it'd be better for him to talk to it than me for
Mhm.
sure. And maybe what we could do is maybe re-follow up on that. I did get a vendor form to try to get HeartMath to go ahead and sign up for. Um, but we could most certainly do that too and try to maybe
Yes.
re-engage that guy.
Yeah, I remember now that our administrators really were pushing for the BIST training. That
That was another reason why I kind of stopped pursuing it too, was I think John kind of stepped in and said, if I remember right, again, I'm not looking at it, he kind of stepped in and was like, hey, this is what we would rather spend it on BIS training and move in that direction.
right.
Nah,
Yeah,
that's right. That's the reason why I didn't poke back to heart math.
right.
That's right. But we could revisit it from this standpoint, knowing now that this other training will now have to come out of next year. So now we'll have 5,000 or so dollars. Because yeah, we definitely don't want to send it back. Um, or do we? I don't know. I don't
Well,
know. I never know the right answer, right? If we can't spend it appropriately or need to spend it in a certain area, like would they use it somewhere else? I don't know how that really goes, though. Probably not.
well, we could talk about it more on Thursday and with Serena, and John's not going to be there, but we'll have another administrator. So actually, he's
And
trained to be here.
and I think Josh will be there too, because I think from an administrator standpoint, he knows a little bit more of the history behind, the changes there at Soaring Eagles and different things like that that kind of happened all at the same time. And then this grant being in the midst of it, and then more administrator buy-in is what they wanted. And yeah, y'all had such a transition in your leadership
Yeah.
in the first year, you know. So,
Yeah.
oh man, I need to bring everybody back. I'm sitting here. We could have kept on talking all night, and they just would have been out
All
there
right.
in the breakout. That would have been funny. All right. How was that for everybody? Everybody get a good chance? Yeah, go ahead, Emily.
So, here, I'll turn my camera on. So, my partner and I, we weren't entirely sure what the directions were. So what we did actually was we discussed we kind of took a weird way of discussing how you see like these super photogenic poses, and this is what the goal is for like this yoga pose, and how it might be hard for people who aren't flexible or who are flexible, and that idea of like settling inside of the discomfort of the pose and like that whole process of it rather than hitting that super photogenic pose, and how addressing and being authentic with like my body moves like this, if your body doesn't move like this is what it may look like for you, and kind of validating the process of getting into these poses, rather than like this is what you should look like all the
That's
time,
right.
because we talk about the modifications and accommodations for all of these different things, and I think it can be hard sometimes to know how to talk about that if we also need the modifications ourselves.
That's right, because we're all different, right? I think that's another big piece to this is we're absolutely not going to get there. And if this is the first time some of the people that you'll be teaching, and let's just say the kids in our schools or even our staff and teachers, they may not be able to do a full forward fold, right? And then to kind of feel ashamed because you're looking at this guy right here that's, like I said, the whole triangle, triangle, and triangle. And, that's just not the way we're all meant to be. And I'll just add one more thing is for the people who wasn't here on Friday, yeah, Friday, is I also mentioned about anatomy, right? Inside of these yoga books, like if you find some of these old yoga books, you won't find anything on traditional anatomy, but you may find things on anatomy in the sense of linear, like the body and the way that it focuses. But they were very much more focused on you feeling and knowing your body more than it ever was the pose itself, right? Maybe you might find some lineages that might be very rigid, but overall, the whole premise behind yoga is noticing your body, being able to do it, and apply grace as you move forward with your body as well. Sorry, go ahead, Don.
My partner and I kind of had a conversation about the language used to describe the movement and how your body should look doing that movement too, and how to kind of scaffold that to people so we understand as well, but they also understand, because it could get lengthy, like perpendicular and parallel, and how do we scaffold that to whoever we're teaching?
That's right, because they may not know those words for one, and then if you get into a younger population, right, they definitely won't know. But there might also be a language barrier the more that we, use some of that language as well. So definitely, and I would say, to that piece, that is a very important piece, right? Is almost now we're talking about even intertwining and talking about culture and other things that we have to also worry about as we talk about the language that we use in this as well, which is part of these breakouts, what we're supposed to be doing. So thank you for that. All right. So now moving into triangle. Oh, actually, I didn't look at the chat box. Hold on one second. Sorry. Okay. Nothing else. So now talking about triangle pose. I like triangle pose, and I'm going to show a video on triangle pose, but I'm going to show you something that I think enhances this pose a little bit. Is really whenever you look at this pose, what people don't talk about enough is you really want to poke this hip out before you elongate out, right? She doesn't really talk about that in the video, but whenever you look at this pose, you kind of want this hip to be, in line out here. And a lot of times if you don't kind of poke your hip out, like literally as you're in the pose and you're getting into your stance, literally take the stance of poking, I guess you can't see my hips, but literally poking my hip outward in a way that is almost over exaggerated. And whenever you do that, whenever y'all focus on anatomy, you'll see that really whenever you poke that hip out, it aligns this ball joint and everything back into this, right? It just kind of makes it a little bit more of a linear or a smoother process, and you kind of feel the stretch a little bit deeper. But everything else here, right, as you kind of start in this process, you have your foot at that 90-degree angle. Ensure that this is kind of aligned forward. And then whenever you do this, you poke your hip out, and then you elongate your spine, and then just kind of drop it over. But it's also engaged, right? You're also almost, this wide stance that you have here is the same here, but you're just opening up that chest, right? That heart chakra as we kind of open that up. And then this guy looks up. I will say I don't require or say for people to look up. I just tell them to look in a direction that their neck is comfortable. Because again, maybe I'm just oversensitive of people's necks. But I think that's an important thing to think about. But here, some contraindications, right? A neck injury, because again, you're kind of leaving your head lingering here, and you kind of look up in this pose. And then also low blood pressure, congestive heart disorder, because you're kind of also getting into this, not really an inversion, but you're kind of leaning forward. And then a counter pose would be a standing forward bend. Anybody got any questions about this one? Again, I like triangle pose. I think it opens up the hips a little bit more than the other poses in a more active way by pushing that hip out and doing those things. But definitely a great pose. And I think you see it a lot in a lot of yoga sequences out there. So we'll watch the video and then we'll do another breakout for this one.
Hi there. Welcome back. My name is Andrea Russell, and this is the right way to do triangle pose. Before we dive into the right way, I want to show you guys a few of the wrong ways that I see students doing triangle. So when you come into triangle, often the feet are pointed in the wrong direction. People will have their hip coming back, their hand will be too far down or too high up, the bottom of their waist will be round and their arm will be sort of going rogue. So something like this doesn't really look much like a triangle, right? So let's talk about how we can do triangle the right way. So first, you want your toes, your front foot toes pointing forward, back foot toes at about a 45-degree angle, and then really be clear about making length on the underside of your body. Feel free to use a block here if your hand doesn't come down all the way to the floor. Block outside of the ankle, and then reach your left arm up. Make sure that the chest is in line with the hips, so not too far forward, not too far back, and then lift the chest. The left wrist is in a straight line above the shoulder, so you have a straight line from wrist to wrist, and you're turning your body. Engage the inner thighs, make sure the left outer hip is pulling up and in, and turn the body. And you've got a series of overlapping triangles. And that's the right way to do triangle pose. Thanks so much for watching.
All right, does anybody have any questions about triangle pose? All right, I will say she mentioned the hip, and on the bad side of things, whenever she was talking about the hip, she meant it not being aligned in the plane. So another thing that I don't know if she mentioned that part is your body. If you could almost think of your body as you do this triangle pose, should almost be in a plane and nothing should be outside. So your hip shouldn't be leaning forward or backwards. It should be aligned with the entire body. So kind of that line on the mat. So that's kind of what she meant by that. All right, then let's go ahead and do breakouts. So the purpose of the breakouts is to sit there and have conversations about this. So you can most certainly do it that way if you would like. Sorry, getting everybody assigned. But really the goal is to go over the pose, talk about the pose. If you can, try to practice the pose, practice in a way of walking somebody through the pose. And one person will have 5 minutes that way, and then have 5 minutes on the other side for the other person to teach the pose. But again, if you don't want to do that type of style, you could also just walk through the pose together and have a conversation about how you would walk through that pose with other people and get your language down. Because the goal right here of the breakouts is more about getting to a point to where we are familiar with the pose, familiar with how to walk people through the pose, and our language around people getting into the pose and thinking about it from that teacher aspect. All right. I'm going to go ahead and send everybody out to the breakout rooms. I have about 10 minutes again. Hey, Linda. Can't tell what room you're in. Looks like you're still in that room.
Shoot. I accidentally disconnected from Brett.
He's all right.
Oops.
We're getting ready to come back anyway, I feel like. Yeah, right now. So I'll close the rooms anyway. Oh, nope, you're going back. Linda just went back to the room. You were coming back here.
Oh, she said she
we
had
were
a
done
phone
anyway.
call, but
Yeah.
we're almost at time, right?
Yeah, we were done anyway. Everybody's coming back.
All right, a good time.
All right, how was that for everybody? Chat pulled up again.
I think I realized I need to be more flexible because the whole 90 degrees thing wasn't working out for me.
Right? I mean, again, I think we gotta do this with grace, right? Because I can't get there either.
Yeah, so I guess just doing it enough and getting that flexibility to where you can actually do the poses correctly. Because yeah, it's hard to focus on your breathing when you're struggling with the pose in general.
That's right. But then that also goes to, as you all start to teach, you all got to think about that, right? Because you're going to be a little bit winded also teaching in front of people. So you got to kind of anticipate that too.
Yeah, that's a good point.
I realized oh.
Sorry, go ahead.
I was gonna say, I realized I've been doing it wrong. I've been having my hand on the inside of the foot instead of the outside.
Yeah, that's a good point because whenever you put it on the inside, you kind of create a cattywampus shoulder base whenever you kind of do it that way. I mean, I guess not all the time, but I guess that would be the perception of it as well. Go ahead, Mike. I think it was Micah or anybody else.
What's that?
I just found it a lot harder than I expected to talk and do at the same time.
That's right. I mean that is a challenge, right? Is if you're going to be talking to somebody and be able to do that. I'll say I was going to save this for a future class, but another thing to keep in mind is a lot of times as you kind of grow in being a teacher, the teachers are doing it the opposite in front of you a lot of times, right? If they're telling you to lift your left arm, they're lifting their right arm, right? Because they're mirroring what you do. So also to think about that, Micah, in the future, I mean, you will not have to be expected to do that um, in this class. Like that's not something I'm trying to tell you. I mean, more like in the future, right? As you start to teach classes now, you might even notice that some of those teachers are even teaching and doing the opposite of everything that you're kind of doing, which to me is more of a struggle. Um, you know. So anybody else? Anybody else notice anything? Oh, got it. My partner and I talked a lot about variations or modifications. Yeah, absolutely right. Is whenever you also look at this modification, I would also say you can have this arm continue to come up on different things, right? Is this you can see people doing this pose that is literally, in line with this. But I'll say whenever you do variations, the most important part is this linear path, right? Don't forget about the triangles, right? This triangle might just get wider, but you're looking, if they're going to have their torso more up like this, you want to make sure that that spine is still kind of elongated through that process. So kind of maintaining that, the more that they kind of swing up in that process. So that's a good point too. As we do that modification, I would say another modification would be to slightly bend this knee a little bit if they're having hamstring problems. I would steer away from trying to bend this knee more in that I would just bring the leg in. So anytime you're kind of thinking of this back leg for any of these poses, instead of kind of bending it whenever it's facing that way, I would think about just shortening the stance, and then of course having them not lean so far over. And if they don't have anything like a chair, because typically if they're going to be more leaned up like this, you would have them lean up against a chair. If you're doing this with your students, you may absolutely may have a chair. Think about them having wheels on it though, right? You don't want the chair rolling away from them and your kids falling forward and all kinds of things. But they could also do it on their desk and other things like that. But whenever you don't have those and you're in a yoga studio or you were on a mat and just didn't have those resources, they can just stand there. But I would then say then a contraindication would be vertigo and other things like that, just kind of being at that limb and things like that. So I just keep that in mind as start to think about even in the modifications may increase contraindications. But just kind of think of that process. And the only reason I would say that is because they wouldn't have a grasp of anything, but also, still at that linear, or not linear, but kind of leaning over process. So that was great. Anything else? All right. Well, then let's go ahead and take a 15-minute break until 6 o'clock, and then we'll come back and then kind of start winding everything down. All right, everybody. We'll go ahead and get started. So now we're going to be talking about fierce or chair pose. Here, this is a relatively simple pose, so I don't have a video that will show this one. But whenever you look at this one, a counter pose would be a standing forward fold. And then a contraindication would be low blood pressure, insomnia, and knee injury. And I would say probably the reason for insomnia would be, honestly, I don't know why they would call it just insomnia, but I would say anybody who's kind of back in this kind of bent position there. Get my laser pointer back out, kind of this position here to where he's kind of going to be off balance a bit, I guess you can say, as you sit into this pose. You can get a little bit off balance. So maybe that's the reason for insomnia, but something tells me this pose isn't going to send you into like immediate sleep. So, but I would say it'd be more about balance than it would be anything, because that's a little bit more of a challenging thing to kind of be here at this 90-ish degree angle. Also, I'll say whenever you look here with the toes and the knee, really the knees should never be too far past these toes. You can kind of see that's almost in alignment. So you want that to be aligned. You can kind of see him getting into it here, and he's more back into the seat. And I'll also say through here, right, you're wanting to elongate the spine and be able to do that. For modifications, also here, for modifications is really you just don't bend the knees as far, but you still kind of sit back a little bit. But the further you can just stand up, the easier it is for this particular pose. Any questions about chair pose? I think this is a pretty easy one to kind of engage people in. And all of these standing poses can also flow into one another, which is also, as you kind of see them in here, is in an Ashtanga style pose that you're flowing from each one. And then once you do one side, you'll go back in Ashtanga yoga and do the other side. So you'll do all the left side, and then you'll do all the right side of all these standing poses. Let's see. So extended side angle pose. So to me, this is another great pose. It's another pose that you'll see a lot because it's kind of easy to implement in the standing poses arena of everything. For the most part, everything that you've already learned about warrior and those type are triangle and the warrior pose, right? It kind of stands the same here. You're kind of getting into that, but instead you're going to kind of drop over to your side and kind of let this arm touch the ground. I know you can barely kind of see it in the background, but his actual arm behind his leg is on the ground as well. Now you can have it on the ground to where your wrist and everything is bent. You can just touch the ground. A variation, as you can see up here, is he has it resting on his knee there as well. But you could also have blocks back there to try to have it not have pressure on the knee, which is what I would recommend, instead of having them put it on their knee. Is it okay to put it on the knee? Absolutely. It just adds a little bit of pressure on that top of the knee. So to me, it's better to kind of have a block back there that you can use. And then of course you're stretching out through here. You can kind of see in this variation, it's a little bit not as straight as well. So you can kind of be a little bit more loose through here. As you can kind of see whenever you're stretching through here, it is very, very much tight and almost a linear path of leaning straight out that way. So this is the traditional pose. This would be the alteration of it. Ugh, can't talk tonight. Any questions about side angle pose? Yeah, go ahead.
I have a question. So, like this one, I was thinking about with the triangle pose as well. When you're stretching off to one side, what would you recommend to before you stretch the other side? Would it be best to do like a counter pose to this one, or like a different pose to kind of get you over to the other side, or do you just do this side and then do the other side?
Yeah, that's a great question. I would say most of the time you would get them back into Tadasana. So you come back to the standing pose, and then you would do the other side. I would say probably 90% of places do that. So you'd almost walk into it, and then you would step this back leg forward, right? Kind of standing up at the same time. And then you would walk back to Tadasana, then take your opposite leg and then step that one back, and then walk through this entire process all over again, just on the opposite side. So if you did left and started on your left, and you'll do the right. Now, what I meant whenever I was talking about Ashtanga yoga, what they do is they'll do like warrior one, then they'll move into on the left side, then they'll do triangle pose on the left side, then they'll do warrior two on the left side, and they'll go all the way down through their standing poses. And then they'll do all the left side of those, or I guess I said left side. Then they'll go back through those range of motions from the very beginning, and then go all the way back on the right side. So it's kind of not like you're doing one pose at a time with them. It's almost like you're doing the entire sequence. So you may see things like that, but ultimately what you would do here would be there. And then whenever you're done and you stretched out the right side as well and you feel good, and then you come back to Tadasana, then this is where you could then go down into downward facing dog for that counter pose, if that's what you chose to do. And are transitioned, right? So then you can almost go into downward dog, and then go into a pigeon pose or something along those lines. But that would be the sequence. Did that answer your question?
It sure did.
Okay. All right, perfect. Any other questions?
Can I ask something that's probably pretty stupid?
Nope, there's no stupid question. Whoops.
I promise you, sir, I have some. I promise you.
I was going to say that I do believe there are some. There are some for sure.
When you have someone in a pose and you're telling them like you should feel this stretching or you should feel this happening, and they're telling you that they don't feel it, are you trying to reevaluate the pose? How do you?
I typically, whenever I notice that, and especially if it's in a class, so let's back up and say that we're in a class, and you're like, hey, and then one of the students says, wait a minute, I don't feel, let's see this pose, I'm not feeling this in my side, and I'm not feeling this through here. I tend to probably 95% of the time associate that with they don't understand their body, right? Because most people don't. So if I'm looking at the pose and everything looks great, and you're looking at them and they literally look like this guy, even if they're not, like, and they're good, they're aligned, their knee isn't cattywampus, they're in this plane type of mindset, and they're not, leaning forward or backwards. I genuinely would associate that most of the time with they're not really associated. Like whenever they feel a stretch here, they will be focused on the pain and the pinch here. You know what I mean? So it could be also that they're focused on different areas of the body, and I wouldn't read too much into it at first if everything looks okay. Now, if they are complaining that it is painful, then I think that would be different. Then I would say, then they need to come out of the pose immediately if it's pain related. But if they're just kind of like, I don't feel it there, right? Or, it kind of feels like it's over here, I tend to ignore, I won't say ignore it. I'll just tell them to listen to their body with grace, or, listen to your body. And if that's what it's saying, that's what it's saying right now, right? That's what it's letting you know, right? So just kind of reinforce that that's okay. And the knowledge too that most people are not in tune with their body, especially if you're going to be doing this with younger kids. But even older folks, again, body keeps the score. Let's just say somebody did have some broken ribs on the side years ago and still not healed, right? They might focus more attention on this side, even though they might be feeling it over here. So there could be a whole range of things that's going on. But you're right. I would look at the pose and just kind of make sure that they're aligned, everything looks good. And then if it is, I would ignore it probably 99% of the time. Again, pain though. If it's pain, come out of the pose. Don't ignore pain. Don't ignore pain at all. And I think we should tell our folks that we're going to do a pain class that'll talk about the neuroscience of pain, and kind of talk a little bit about that, right? Is pain, even if it's perceived pain, is pain no matter what. So we'll talk more about that later. But okay, that was a great question too. Anything else? Okay.
Extended side angle pose. Take a step back with one foot, opening your hips out to the side and extending your arms parallel to the floor. Bend the front knee and press your hips forward as you begin to reach over, extending the top arm over the front leg. The bottom arm bends to rest on the front leg, and the gaze is to the side or upwards. To exit, simply reverse the motion, step forward, and inhale back in mountain pose. Extended side angle pose.
All right. Any questions about this one? I feel like she made it look pretty easy as far as that went. She obviously didn't do the variation of the leg down or the hand down the leg or beside the leg. She did the adaptation version, but still good. But any questions? All right, we're not gonna break out into a breakout room just yet. We're gonna go over one more video or one more pose. So revolved side angle pose. So this one, for the most part is almost exactly the same as the other one, but kind of whenever you get here, you kind of see his hips are aligned right here, right? They're straight forward, straight knee, right? 90-degree angle, not above the toe or probing out. Probing, that's not a word. Probing out right here, right? That's whenever you notice that you'll need to correct people. Doesn't look cattywampus off to the left or right. So I will say, whenever I say about variations and seeing people in these poses, these are some of the things that are kind of like the non-negotiable, like whenever we talk about, hey, you can kind of lean up here or do things like that. Whenever we talk about this alignment of the knee, kind of like non-negotiable. If you see them doing these things, it needs to kind of be corrected. And also here, so in this back leg, right, you're kind of engaging this part. You see the foot is engaged, and now he's starting to twist, right? So he's rotating his shoulders, grabbing his leg and using this. But I'll say every time you see these types of things of grabbing, you'll see people, especially at the beginning of yoga or whenever they first start, that they use that as an opportunity to force their body. Anytime you do a twist, you are just using that almost as a steadying point and not a leverage point. So you're not tweaking your body around. You aren't forcing your body around in any twist. So whenever you see him kind of twisting that way, remember that he's not pulling on his knee in any way. And then whenever he does this, right, he stretches this arm out while dropping the other arm beside the leg. And then, of course, there's other variations. You could also put blocks down here and do this, but you see him getting into this probably more advanced pose of kind of having the prayer namaste mudra kind of there as well. Any questions about this one? Contraindications, knee injuries, migraine, low blood pressure, and then the counter pose would be the standing forward bend. But any questions about this pose? This one's too easy. So I'll say the reason why I showed this one is also whenever you are in the regular side angle pose, you could almost, you'll see a lot of people in sequences move almost from that side angle pose whenever you're in that lunge type of thing, to move from the one side to immediately to doing this revolved side angle pose. So that's the reason why I showed them back to back, and we'll do a breakout to kind of discuss both of those variations. But kind of whenever you're in this pose or right here in the side angle pose, right, then you basically just twist over and then do this other side here. So you'll just see that variation a lot of times in studios just because you're already there. So a lot of times they'll just kind of tell you to swing around and stretch out the other side. But that's the reason why we're doing both of these before we do the breakout. So no questions? Let's watch the video.
Enter into revolved side angle by stepping back into a nice high lunge. Twist and place the opposite elbow to the outside knee and gently press into that knee. Option is to extend the arms open, opening the chest to the side and bringing gaze to the side or behind you. Gently untwist to exit out. Enter into revolved side angle by stepping back into a nice high lunge.
One word that she used that I would never use is press. So whenever she says press into or gently press into the knee, like more that you should be saying something along the lines of you will feel the knee
Enter into
or you
revolved
will feel
side
the
angle
elbow
by
on the
stepping
knee
back into a nice
instead of um, instead of pressing. Even if you're saying gently press, anytime you say the word press, people feel like they have to push it, and then that makes that knee cattywampus because you can kind of see where that elbow, if you were to say press, could easily push in on that knee, forcing it to kind of
Enter
start to
into
come in.
revolved side angle by stepping back.
Why is this going to be so difficult? Um, but any questions on that one before we break out so we can talk about those two poses? So whenever you break out, maybe walk through one or the other, and then have your partner walk through one or the other, or you can talk about both of them at the same time and kind of walk through both of them. But just to know that in a yoga studio, whenever you go visit one, you may see these two almost smushed together to where they're doing one side and the other before you kind of come out of that lunge mindset. So that's the reason why I showed them both together that way. All right, if no questions, let's go ahead and go to the breakouts. Let me get it pulled up real quick. All right. See you all back in about 10 minutes or less.
Yeah. Yeah.
That makes sense.
So he didn't get put in one.
Oh.
All right. How was that for everybody? What everybody noticing that one?
My partner and I were really trying to find the flow from moving between the extended side angle to the revolved side angle.
I
And
will
trying to
add.
envision and move that way.
Yeah, it's kind of challenging, right? Because you almost have to straighten up those hips a little bit and things like that. Um, but I will say I never do it that way. I probably should have added that before y'all broke out, like you see it in studios. But I never do it that way. I bring it all the way back to mountain pose and then go into the other poses. I don't try to do that variation, but I just know that it's seen. I have seen it in a lot of yoga studios. So
I noticed that we usually go into twisted side angle from crescent pose.
okay, yeah, that's a good one too. That is a good way to kind of transition into it for sure. Absolutely.
And blocks are definitely your friend in twisted side angle.
Absolutely. Right. Like you have to, I mean, I use blocks all the time. I don't think I would do yoga without my blocks. It helps me a lot. It helps bring the ground up to me, right? That's the point of the blocks is to bring the ground up to you. Um, and I'll add the blocks that you all have. I chose those on purpose because a lot of times blocks are too big to put your hands on sometimes. So that's another reason why I kind of got the ones to where they're a little bit smaller. So hopefully that'll be helpful. Thanks for that, Linda. And that is a good way to transition into it too. See anybody else? All right. Thank you. I have tiny hands. I was thinking of you. So there you go. All right. So kind of moving on. So wide-legged standing forward bend. I don't have a video for the next couple here. Just kind of walking through them. But whenever you look here, right, we've kind of already talked about this one. Let me get my pointer back out here. Whenever we talk about this one, right, you're kind of elongated through there if you're doing the variation. Whenever you're kind of folding forward, you'll see variations to where people reach out and grab their big toes. That is definitely the variation inside of Ashtanga yoga is reaching out and grabbing the toes. But you'll also see people kind of reach around just like you were in whenever your legs were together doing a forward bend is they'll reach their arms around the back of their legs for a variation. But the main things here, making sure the hips are aligned, making sure the shoulders are aligned. You can kind of see her shoulders are very much aligned. If they are kind of cattywampus, it's kind of hard to get people to see that. And you may have to kind of just kind of point it out to them instead of actually touching them because at the end of the day to get somebody's hips back into a set position you would almost have to touch them in this area and I would almost say that's a no-go. I would never touch anybody or get their hips aligned, so if you do see their hips not aligned I usually tell them about it. I don't help correct them for trauma sensitive type of yoga. And then, of course, this is a variation to where you could keep people here instead of having them coming all the way down here as well. Other variations is you can kind of bend the knees a little bit. You can also sit in a chair and do this. And trying to think of anything else. Another thing is you could put blankets kind of behind the heels. That can kind of help offset some of the hamstring strain as well. But those are some of the things. Contraindications, low back injury, high blood pressure, mainly because of this right here. So if they do have high blood pressure, you probably want to keep them more like this. And let's see, I think that's about it here. This is pretty straightforward. Another pose that's kind of pretty common, even in regular physical education, is to kind of stretch out those hamstrings a little bit. But any questions on this one? All right. All right, intensive side angle. I don't have a video on this one either, just because I feel like we've talked about enough of these types of poses already. But for the most part, right, you see his hips are straight, shoulders are straight, chest is open, and then you lean forward, right? So both legs are straight. That is probably different from some of the other ones we talked about. And then you're just folding forward, and you will feel this stretch, in both hamstrings. And of course, the further you go. And I will say a lot of variations have this, hands together tight behind your back. This is definitely more of an advanced style, but an adaptation would just be to put your arms like this. I will say I have never probably been able to do this, or I've been probably closer to being able to do it, but it's not something I can consistently do. So not everybody is going to be able to kind of get into even that with their hands together like that. So really, I think this is probably the better variation to kind of teach people, especially starting out with yoga, and then just to fold forward. But again, this is a great variation. I think this works a lot of your hamstrings. I like this pose more than doing any other types of hamstring pose or stretches. I feel like this works really, really well. Any questions about this one?
If you were going to accommodate some shoulder discomfort, would you have them put hands on hips or have hands down by side?
Hands on hip would be good, because then they can even feel their hips and make sure they don't go cattywampus. But I would say most certainly good point. I didn't mention anything, and I don't even think I had it up there in the contraindications. Is definitely shoulder injuries here, right? Because if you look back to that point, right, is bringing those shoulders back. I know we hadn't really had much of the anatomy, but you're almost kind of doing a rotation that's not, it can cause unease. So anybody that's definitely had shoulder replacements for sure, I wouldn't even have them try doing this part right here. And maybe not even this, depending on the shoulder. Typically something like this will be pretty easy on their shoulders. And if you look, it's aligned whenever you do it this way. Whenever you look back, this one just causes more, in my opinion, a backward rotation backwards, which causes tension. And you don't really see that whenever you do it this way. So I guess, Don, to your point, I would have them fill it out, maybe hands on hips, but they might even be able to do this. This may be like the advanced place for somebody with some shoulder injuries, maybe not full on shoulder replacements, but maybe, some shoulder injuries and some discomfort. This might be an advanced area to kind of get to, but I don't think it would hurt them because of the things that I said, right? The ball joint goes down, which is normal. It would probably be more with the elbow than it would be the shoulder on this one. But this one would most certainly be the shoulder, for sure, 100%. But I think hands on hips, and the only reason I say hands on hips versus down by your side is, again, just to be able to feel your hips, right? Starting to get that body awareness and things like that. All right. Let's see, any other questions? All right, now we'll talk a little bit about extended hand to big toe. And then this one is a side or stretched sideward pose. So really what it is once you get to this phase, you're pretty much pulling it all the way out to the side to where you are almost an even plane, like in between two pieces of glass. Here, you're not really so much that way. You can kind of have the leg out in front of you and kind of pull it to the side to where it's almost at an angle instead of all the way to the side. So that's really the difference between the sideward pose versus the hand to toe pose. But really this is, you reach down, you grab your big toe, wrap it around your finger, and then you extend your leg out, and then you just start to work your way over to the side. This is a balancing pose. So, definitely keep that in mind. Let's see, up here we have knee, ankle, hip injuries. Here we actually call out vertigo, but they call out a hernia too. And the hernia is because if you're hovering your leg out that far for that long, it could definitely irritate your hernia if you have one. But definitely vertigo because it's a balancing pose. So anything with vertigo would be that way too. But I would say variations to this, right? We have the strap here. That is an easy way to do that variation. And as you're kind of pulling it out here, I would say that you could have your knee bent would be a variation to where you're just really kind of still focused on the balancing. Because again, whenever we're thinking about the pose itself and it's a balancing pose, it's probably more about this balance than it is holding your big toe out in front of you, right? So, so kind of keep that in mind. So a variation could easily be just bending your knee. But also, I would say if you don't want to do this pose because it is a awkward pose, especially at the beginning of somebody doing yoga. So if you're just now teaching people yoga, this is an extremely challenging pose, in my opinion. And I would say maybe not here. Like this seems a little bit easier, but here is an extremely challenging pose once you try to pull it out to the side and keep it flat, especially for a balancing pose. I would just do tree pose if you were thinking you were going to do hand to big toe pose. That's just me. I would probably avoid this one altogether. But that's my sequencing, right? Some people really love this in their sequences. And it does do a good stretch. I don't want to take anything away from it, right? Here you're going to be feeling the hamstring, and even in the balancing, you're going to be activating that core. And your shoulders are wide open, so your chest is open as well. So it is a very good pose. So I don't want to discredit it, but I just don't do it enough to really implement it into my sequences ever. Oh, does anybody have any questions about this one? I would say another variation is you could do it on the ground, right? Because if you look, you could easily do this on the ground. You would just have this leg, just picture this person on the ground. You could have the strap there and even drop it to the side. Same thing with this, even if you have your hand to your big toe, if you're laying down, you could easily then just drop it to the side into this right here. So that is another variation and could help with people who have the vertigo issues and other things like that. All right, too easy. All right, tree pose, another balancing pose. This is probably another common pose. And contraindications, headache, high blood pressure, right? Keep hands under the heart so you wouldn't lift them up if they do, or even right here might be a challenge. You'd want them to maybe have it down here in the sacral or yeah, whatever. And then standing forward bend is the counter pose. So now whenever we're looking at this pose, I would say probably some of the most common mistakes is whenever they put this leg up here, this leg is not pushing on anything. That foot, or I guess foot right here on the leg is literally just being placed there, right? So kind of back to that whole elbow on the knee for the revolved side angle, right? Whenever they were talked about gently press, right? We don't want to press this foot onto your leg at all. This should be a very gentle and easy thing. And a lot of times what you'll see is people will put this leg up here and then you can kind of almost see all the pressure and the leg right here, the quad, would almost turn white, right? Because whenever you put pressure on things, it kind of changes colors and turns into a more, a different color. So you can kind of notice that. You can also notice the tissue of the leg would be pushed out, right? But ultimately, this should almost just be barely sitting in there. And same thing if you do a modification down here, right? This heel shouldn't be digging into the person's leg. And there's also a variation where you just don't have the leg up as high. But if you do that, no matter what, nobody's heel or foot should be on this knee or on this joint. So that is a no-go. That would be like you need to stop them immediately. Like that could cause damage of, especially if they're putting the pressure on it as well, meaning that they have the heel digging into this joint. It could cause a lot of discomfort and pain, and maybe even some bad things to happen over time. So keep that in mind, right? Keep it off the joint. This should have no pressure onto your leg. This should really just be sitting on your leg. And then the hand variations, I would say if you're doing this with kids, you could definitely do different variations than just this. You know, we do cactus poses to where people are doing different things, right? You can, you know, with tree pose, you can kind of get a little bit creative. One thing that I wouldn't recommend though is to have people hop around, right? Don't have them hop around. That wouldn't be good. But otherwise, you know, these variations right down here, again, the heel should not be digging into their shin, because if you could almost see that too if that was happening. And then right here, you can have them put their leg here instead of all the way up into the growing. Any questions on tree pose? Too easy? Well, now let's get into another one that is a very common exercise or a common pose that you will see. I feel like I almost see Warrior 2 in almost every sequence that is out there. I won't say all the time, but it does seem like it's that common to kind of be out there in the world. Counter pose is downward facing dog. Contraindications is neck injury, because you're kind of turning the head here to look over is the reason why it would be a neck injury. But also whenever you lift up these arms, it can also cause tension on the neck as well, because it's kind of starting to create the pinch on things, right, whenever we talk about that. So here we start in Tanasana, and then we open our arms up. We then shift our feet, right, one facing straight ahead, the other one at a 90-degree angle. Our hips are turning, are not turning, but they are flat, right? You're not keeping them, you're not going to spin them to the front. You're going to keep them facing towards where the pitcher's facing. That's the reason why I said front, but really you're almost at an angle with this one, right? So whenever you're here, you're almost between those two planes again. And then your knee, all the things with your knee, right? Again, right, it shouldn't be over to the sides, and it should not be in front of the toes. And then you're going to feel this stretch through here. You're going to feel it in your quads. You're going to be activating your core, and most certainly you're going to feel it in your shoulders. And you can look over. I will say something that I offer all the time is that there is nothing in the science, in the anatomy, in anything that says that your hands have to be facing down. So they can rotate their hands up if they want to. They can have them out almost, you know, like this if they want to, however they want to. There is nothing that offers that, but you can almost offer that as a variation. I'd also say if they do have those shoulder injuries and things like that, I would almost tell them to put their hands on their hips here as well. So then that way that would help with those shoulder things and still stay in tune with the body. But any questions on this one? All right, we do got a video on this one though.
My name is Paris Alexandra.
And my name is Alicia Ferguson.
And this is The Right Way with Well and Good. So I'm going to show you today how to do the right way with Warrior 2. But first, I'm going to show you some common mistakes we make. So our lovely model Alicia here is going to help us out doing it the wrong way first. Wow. Oh. Yeah. As you can see, knee is definitely going over the ankle. Not good. Chest is poking out. It's doing a lot. It's giving a lot. And then you can also see that her stance is extremely short. How do you feel?
I'm trying.
She's trying. All right, so we're actually going to take a pause and do it the right way. Beautiful, just impeccable. So as you can see, the knee is not going over the ankle. It's right there. The length, the distance between the feet, setting energy there. You go, girl. If you enjoyed that, subscribe to Well and Good, and we'll see you next time.
All right. Any questions about Warrior 2?
I have a question.
Yep,
So
go for it.
in the video, the right way, it didn't look like her front leg was bent at a 90-degree angle. And also her back leg, the back foot wasn't, shouldn't it be like more a little bit diagonal, or should it be perpendicular to the front foot?
It should be perpendicular because you're kind of so whenever you see this, I would say, well, this is probably the bad way whenever she was doing it. This foot should almost be at an angle back that way. So this foot would be straight, this foot would be back there and almost at a 90 or 45-degree angle this way. So I would definitely say that. But I would say here, whenever it's not at this 90-degree, that is okay. That would be a variation. But the problem would be whenever this knee would then go out in front of the ankle, and definitely if it's in front of the toes. Maybe there's a little bit of wiggle room there, but for sure you don't want that knee going in front of those toes. You don't want it to be kind of pushing forward. So if it's kind of back like this in that 90-degree angle, that is okay. Because that's more of a variation. That just means you're not really, may have some knee issues, may have some quad issues, maybe even some calf issues, or even ankle issues, right? Because you'd be putting a lot of pressure on that ankle if you were in that 90-degree angle. So this could very much, so that wouldn't necessarily be, so if you're teaching a class and you kind of see that variation, that wouldn't be something to worry about. But then also I would say to think of also the two pieces of glass, right? So really, it would almost be that she needs to be with a flat piece of glass behind her and a flat piece of glass in front of her, and not to cross those planes at any point in time in this. Besides maybe that foot at that angle. But did that answer your question?
Yeah, okay.
Did it answer your question, or did it just appease your question?
No, yeah, it's
Okay,
good.
okay.
Thank you.
Okay. I didn't mean that snarky. I just wanted to make sure that I was answering your question. I didn't want to. I didn't want to leave that. I didn't want to leave that at hanging, because I do think this pose gets challenging and people get it wrong a lot of times, for sure.
Yeah, because it looks easy, but there's all those little things to look at that could really, someone could really twist their ankle or overextend their knee or hurt their shoulder if they're not aligned properly.
That's right. And that is main reason why we're having these conversations, right? Is to start to think about those things, right? And think about how we can make sure that whenever we're teaching any of these standing poses, like Warrior 1, Warrior 2, Warrior 3, whichever ones we're talking about, triangle pose, that we need to get our language down to where we're almost mitigating the potential damage for that, right? As you step forward and lean into your leg, ensure that your knee doesn't pass the plane of your ankle, right? Doesn't go in front of your ankle. Make sure that it sits behind your ankle. However, you're going to start getting your verbiage in the way that you say those things, in the way that you're going to be comfortable to say them. Sticking to some scripts at first would probably be pretty good, and then working away from it. But I definitely think, starting to understand your language, starting to understand ways that you plan to teach this, and that is really what we're trying to get into right now, and trying to mitigate those things, right? Whether you're working with people with shoulder injuries, knee replacements, whatever it is, you got to start thinking about the language that is inclusive for even those folks, right? To say, listen to your body. If you can't get your leg into a 90-degree angle because there's tension, remember that you can always lean it back, but never lean it forward. We never want the knee to go in front of the ankle. So if you need to lean back, kind of stand up, put your legs closer together, but maintain that plane between two pieces of glass, right? And kind of work into the language of those things. But definitely very challenging for sure, right? And we can see where it gets very challenging. Let's see, any other questions about this? I think we may skip the breakout for this one, just for time's sake. So plow pose. So this one, We do have a video for this one, but this is a challenging pose. Even whenever you look at this, hopefully, let's look at the counter poses. So counter pose would be, of course, rest on your back. I mean, I feel like that's almost an obvious one, right? To be in Shavasana or corpse pose. But counter indications would be menstruating, neck injury, because you can kind of see the neck is kind of in a pinched area there. And let's see, also the shoulders, right? It doesn't say shoulders, but I would be worried about these shoulders here. And if I were to do a variation to help the shoulders, would be to lean it up. But obviously, if you have shoulder issues, that's really bad. This is putting a lot of pressure on those shoulders. So I'd probably skip it altogether. If they had like shoulder replacements, if they did have torn rotator cuffs, I wouldn't want them to have their hands back, even if it's not torn all the way, it's just kind of partial tears. If they were having rotator cuff issues, that just seems like it could cause discomfort. I don't want to say it would mess the rotator cuff up because I think that's a good position for it, but the pressure on top of leaning the arms back, right, you're just kind of adding more variables to that. And to me, it just creates more danger. Asthma, and I would say asthma because you're almost shrinking here, which makes you feel like you can't breathe. That's another problem with plow pose, is kind of whenever you throw these legs over, you're almost going into a back breath style. So if you remember from the 14-day exercises, those back breaths would be really critical here if you were to be in this pose for a while. Especially if you don't want to panic and kind of feel panicked because you're kind of not breathing too well because it's kind of pinched right there, right? Because anytime we kind of start pinching these areas, we cause potential for not damage, but potential for discomfort. Now I'll say whenever I get into this pose, I put this one first because a lot of times, and I think even in both videos, or maybe I can't remember now, but a lot of people will get into shoulder support or supported shoulder stand before they go into plow pose. I will say I typically get into plow pose first, and the way that I do this is whenever I'm here, I start to throw my hips up towards the air. But whenever I do that, I use my legs as momentum to push me over. But then I also pick up my hands and walk my back up as I do that as well. That kind of gives me some extra ability to get over into plow pose. So this is a good one to kind of do, and I think it shows that in the video. I'll say variations you see here. He has the blankets under here. That's a great way to do this as well. I'll say another variation would be to have a chair back here to where your legs would get caught by the chair. So I say caught, like you should not be throwing your body over at all. I know I use that as an analogy to get your hips over and kind of use your legs to but it should be a fluid process. So nothing should really be flopping down whenever I say this. But whenever you think about it, if the chair's there, then your toes would be in the chair and then would kind of give you that support as well in plow pose. If somebody cannot get into plow pose, do not, and I know we're probably not going to talk about really touching folks that often in this class, because in my opinion, most of the time that is going to be a no, right? But here, you could really hurt somebody if they were kind of here and they're not getting into plow pose, and then you come over and set them into it. I would never do that in this pose, in this position for sure. You could cause a lot of damage, and that if you push them too far, you could cause damage through a lot of space through here, through the back. Wouldn't necessarily be spine damage. You're not going to probably paralyze them, but it'll be pulling muscles. It would be things like that. You have the potential to cause them some more discomfort in a lot of those muscles in the back because you'd almost force them into something that they may not be ready to do. Let's see, any question? Well, let's watch the video and then we'll ask for questions on plow pose.
Hey y'all, Nico here. Welcome back to my channel, and if you're new here, thanks for joining me. I'm Nico. Today's video is another yoga pose tutorial where I give you tips on how to get into different yoga poses. And today we are doing halasana, or plow pose. So let's go ahead and get started on our back. I love plow pose because it's really great for stretching this top neck area in the back of my neck. Sometimes it feels like it's hard to get into these areas, but plow definitely helps to get up into the shoulders, up into the neck. And it's also an inversion, so it can kind of bring that fresh blood down towards your brain and get your circulatory system going. So let's go ahead and get started on our back. And we want to kind of start in a shoulder stand by bringing our hips above our shoulders. So start to lift the hips off the ground. You can kind of use your hands as this support underneath the hips. And again, trying to lift the hips so that the shoulders are kind of over, the hips are over the shoulders. So we'll flex our feet and start to let the feet fall behind us, bringing the toes to the ground. Let the legs be together. And gently let those toes fall behind you. So I like to kind of try to press into my hips to make sure they're over my shoulders. Your chin is naturally going to be tucked down towards your chest. So you don't need to do anything extra there. Good. And pull your belly button back. Think about that active belly. Pull your belly button back towards your spine to protect your back and to engage the abs. Good. Inhale. Exhale. I like to just gently roll down. We can kind of hug our knees into our chest. Now, if you're not ready for full plow pose, you can always be in shoulder stand, which is just the legs extended up. You can also move into a bridge pose, Setu Bandha Sarvangasana, which looks like this. And you can also do legs up the wall. These are kind of, legs up the wall is literally just our legs extended and resting against the wall, or you can just bring your feet up with your feet flexed. If you're trying to still get some of those benefits of plow pose, but maybe you're not quite ready for plow pose or shoulder stand, those are a few good modifications. So leave a comment down below letting me know if this video helped.
All right. What are y'all taking away from plow pose right now?
How is she breathing and talking?
I was waiting for somebody to say it. I was going to say it if somebody didn't. Was if you thought all the poses were tough, imagine almost it feels like your trachea is closed, and and on top of it, you're trying to talk at the same time. You can almost see the tone of her voice, or maybe not tone, but just the energy and everything. It was very much more limited on that side. Oh, and drop pounds, yeah. Yeah. I will say to Brett's point in the chat is if you do have more tissue around, I know this is the shoulder stand, but if you have more tissue through here, it will be more challenging for people to get into this pose. And whenever I talk about feeling suffocated and things like that, the more tissue you have through here, and I would also say, people's breast as well. You have to worry about those. Hopefully they're in a sports bra as they're doing this, but the more tissue here, the more likely that there's more weight kind of pushing down onto your throat area, which again just feels uncomfortable. That's all I'll say about it. Some people can do it no matter size, anything, right? Where they have a long torso, short torso, everything. It really is an individual thing, but it does feel very much like you're suffocating sometimes. So, and I'll add here too is don't feel like you have to demonstrate every single pose that somebody does as well. That's another reason why we're talking through how to walk people through it, because necessarily you could have people doing it. I would say maybe not at the beginning of them doing yoga, but if it's like a class and it's a class that you've been teaching all year, and by the end of it, you could almost not even be walking around. You could just be talking through the poses.
So Charlie, I'm going to try this on over the weekend, but I might not be in on Monday.
Workman's comp, right?
No, I don't want to do the paperwork.
That's right. That's right. No paperwork for sure. Okay, but moving into this one, right? So plow pose, complicated. I put this one right afterwards because almost it's the same. You see people who will literally go into plow pose and then go into shoulder pose. You've seen that the lady on the last video was in plow, kind of went into plow pose afterwards and said that that could be a variation to be easier. I would say more of a bridge pose would be something to put people in if they have a lot of issues here. But even in bridge pose, there's a chance for shoulder injuries. So you kind of see here, we got the blankets down here to help people regardless. But I would definitely say shoulder injuries don't get them to do plow pose or this one. Let's see if they have anything else. First trimester pregnancies and high blood pressure. Yeah, probably out, with pregnancies in general, I'd probably avoid this one, in general. I feel like a lot of times one of the main symptoms that people have whenever pregnant is not being able to breathe. So this one may not be a good one to put a pregnant person in. But again, I don't want to say that it's impossible. I just would never do it. Any questions on this one at all?
I don't have a question, but if you're a really avid hiker, this thing is wonderful. I didn't know this was yoga. I've been doing this for years, but it really helps if you backpack and hike.
Absolutely. So she said, and I don't know if I did, but right, you're stretching out those areas back through here on the ground right here in plow pose, our shoulder pose, right? But it's also helping, relieve some of that pressure of backpacking for sure, right? And being able to stretch some of those things out for sure. That's great. Thank you for adding that, right? Another modern way of being able just to implement some of these things. Let me see. Let's go ahead and watch this video too.
For supported shoulder stand or Salamba Sarvangasana, lie down onto your back and hug your knees in towards your chest. Once you get there, plant your hands flat down next to your hips. As you straighten your legs straight up, push down through your hands to lift your hips up, bringing your legs over your head. Once the toes touch the ground, work from shoulder to shoulder to rise up high onto your shoulder tips. Take the palms of your hands as high as you can on the bottom part of your back ribs. Squeeze your elbows in and make sure that your elbows are no wider than your shoulders. Lengthen your neck and don't turn your head from side to side at all in this position. From here, lift one leg up and then the other. Lengthen from the elbows all the way up through the tips of your toes as you point them. Squeeze your feet together, firm the inner thighs in, and draw your navel and ribs in.
All right, pretty straightforward on that one. Yeah, breaks it down step by step verbally. You could also tell that whenever she was in plow pose, her voice didn't change at all. So who knows, she can talk a whole lot better. But really being able to break these poses down step by step, right? That's really kind of our goal here, is to kind of break it down to where we can relate it to people in a step-by-step fashion so they can get into it. And in that step-by-step fashion, that doesn't necessarily mean you have to walk through it with them too, kind of back to that original thought that we were talking about a second ago. So keep that in mind too. Here with corpse pose, I feel like this one's self-explanatory, but this is typically almost the end of every sequence, right? Which is why we have it here. And contraindications would be pregnancy. There's other variations to where you can kind of also put like bolsters underneath the knees. You can put blankets underneath the spine, almost roll it up into a roll about this big, and then you can have it stretch the entire spine. So whenever you're laying on it, it really opens up your chest. So many different variations. Of course, you can have a pillow, eye pillows, so many different things here to really get comfortable. But the goal is to get as comfortable as you possibly can while laying down. Let's see, any questions about anything that we've covered tonight so far? Nothing at all. Everything was good. Okay. Well, one thing that I do want to show, and I may have showed this the first time that we were together, but it is using AI to help us develop these sequences. So what I want to show is, I think I showed the first day of using the GPT that I kind of created. Here you can almost do the same exact thing. And now that we know a little bit more about yoga, you can literally come in here now and you can say, hey, I know that I want my peak pose to be warrior 1. So you can come in and say, develop a sequence where the peak pose is warrior, I should say 2, warrior 2. And we don't have yoga mats and need a sequence for children in 5th grade. In the sequence, make sure it's all standing. And then now that you know that, right, I added a little bit more information just to make it more about the kid, in the classroom type of example. But really, once you kind of pop this out, it will almost walk you through everything that you need to do, right? And it'll do it in the arc in which we teach you, or in which it has in the background, which is the arc of the classes that I said that you would need to do this time. It has the other ones back there, but if you don't tell it to put it into a 2-peak sequence or 3-peak sequence, it's automatically going to do a 1-peak sequence. But it will break down the entire flow. It'll tell you where to go. It'll even give you a brief snapshot of what it is. So again, I'm kind of saying this, like you can give the variations for everything inside of your classes. I would also say if you really need something like a meditation practice, I know I still owe everybody a love and kindness practice from last, I think it was Wednesday. I can't remember what day it was, but I know I owe a love and kindness practice. So I haven't forgot. I'm going to do it. But you can come in here and ask it for a love and kindness practice, right? You could come in here and just say, my peak sequence will be warrior 3. And then I'll probably do another whole, piece to that, right? So again, it'll break it all the way down. I have it trained to do that. So what I'll do is I'll drop this into the chat just so you all will know that you can always come to this one. I've built this GPT out to do just this for us, right? So we can literally go to this anytime you need it. You can ask it for a sequence. You can ask it for education around poses. If you're like, hey, I've been having a hard time really explaining plow pose and getting people to get their legs, to fall over gently to the floor, you can literally come in here and ask it those questions as well. So, or if you had a question around how could I transition from plow pose to get all the way back to downward dog in my transition, you could even come in and ask things like that, right? A little bit more complex questions. So anyway, I just wanted to throw this out here tonight because I know I created a lot of stress around creating sequences. And there really shouldn't be, I want us to understand sequences. I want us to understand the arc. I want you all to be able to know that, but there is no reason why we should really be creating our own sequences in today's world, especially whenever we can have it do it so easily for us now. But I'll say, the human in the loop aspect, right? This is only 80% done. Review it, make sure it doesn't have any contraindications of what you want to teach, make sure it also speaks to you and all those other things, right? Don't just take it and take it for its word. You know, there might need to be some different variations that you need to change. But all right. So y'all have that as a resource. Go ahead, Brett.
Can I just do a little shout out for Charlie and his chat GTP? So I threw my back out pretty, because I'm in my almost 50, doing something I probably shouldn't have been doing. And so I wanted to create a sequence specifically for late 40s, early 50s, with potential back injuries. And it did a really great job kind of building it out. And yeah, I needed to do some tweaks for sure, to your point, Charlie, about the 80%. But it really did do a great job kind of setting some criteria. Now my back's fine now. So I can probably take the back injury part out, but it really did a good job. Like, for example, Cobra pose. Yeah, a month ago, there's no way that was going to happen. I would have been like, no, you need to come beat me with a wiffle bat because I can't do that. So, but it put me all in poses that would not have strained my lower back, which was great. And that was really impressive how it was able to kind of, the more detail you gave it, the better the sequence was.
That's right. Yeah, thank you for adding that part too, is the more detail, right? How I started to add things about it being a classroom with kids, they don't have a mat. You know, you could almost do a standing sequence there at their table. But to Brett's point, you can even add in, right? And say that they're 30 years old with a blown out back. But you know, you can start adding in those different pieces. He probably messed his back up because he was doing plow pose, and messed it all up.
It was actually because I was painting on top of a ladder that said, "This is not a step," and I was trying to make sure I met my wife's criteria.
That's right. That's right. Well, all right, everybody. If y'all don't have anything else, you know, this was really all I had on the agenda. I just wanted to make sure to kind of circle back to the AI piece now that y'all kind of have more of a bearing, and you can kind of see even in the background. I've kind of coded it to where you can or taught it to do all these things for us. So no need to do it on our own. So otherwise, thank you all. I'll see you all, I think in a while, actually. I think coaching, we got some classes coming up, but I think yoga, we got about a month. So actually, I'll add to this. From where I had to change up the class tonight, I will get the invites and everything out to everybody and get everything caught up. Maybe by Friday, but at the very latest, I'll get it done this weekend. So I just want to add that in to everybody.
Thank you, Charlie. I know it's hard for us to attend this late, but I know it's even harder to teach this late. So thank you for keeping us rolling along.
Yeah, thanks for that. I appreciate it. And thank you all for being here with me. So we're doing this together. We got this. All right. Thank you, everybody. If you need me.
Hey, Charlie.
Yeah. Go ahead, Chris.
Quick question for you. So I saw that we have to either film ourselves or basically do our lesson in front of you. Do you know like exactly when that will be? And is there any way I can do it slightly earlier than the 23rd?
Absolutely. We're going to meet on the 27th. I think I mentioned that. I hadn't sent out the invite, but that invite will come out. There'll be, because that's an optional week, you can do it then. Sounds like you need it done before then. All it'll be is you just need to teach your sequence in front of a camera and then record it and then send it to me. You can do that through Zoom, not Zoom, but on Teams here if you can, you know, but I know you probably got resources, you know, in your classroom that might be able to do that too. So, however, it's really just a recording. And on the recording, don't get too stressed about the recording. Don't think about the length of it, right? I'm thinking about, and what I'm going to grade you off of is more about the arc. Are you teaching it? Are you thinking about the process of yoga? And kind of like, is it a teachable class is really what I'm looking for. So no pressure on trying to make it be like this, you know, 2-hour long sequence that goes into a sleep sequence. Like it literally could be, you know, a 10-minute, 20-minute sequence, and that be it.
Okay. I used to teach yoga when I was still in the gym. I teach swimming all day now, so not super in practice, but I have some old lesson plans that I could tweak. So is that okay, or do I
Oh
just need to
yeah.
come up with something completely different?
No, absolutely. If you already got something, I don't know if you've seen or heard whenever I say I literally carry a folder around that has like sequences that are kind of unique to me and things that I've had with some meditations in it. Like, absolutely, lean on what
Okay.
you know for sure.
Sweet. Awesome. Okay. Thank you
Yeah,
so much. I
absolutely.
appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem. I see anybody else got any questions, comments? All right. Then I'll see you all later. Thank you.